When the United States energy company Enron made global headlines in the early 2000s for accounting and corporate fraud, the focus quickly shifted to the company's decision-makers. Kenneth Lay, Jeffrey Skilling, and Andrew Fastow, executives at Enron, were eventually convicted on federal felony charges. That was the proper response. When corporations engage in illegal behavior, the individuals responsible should face consequences, and they frequently do. So, why have the executives of Glencore plc, a commodities and mining multinational headquartered in Switzerland, escaped the consequences of their involvement in years of corrupt behavior in Africa, following extensive investigations by Brazil, the United Kingdom, and the United States? Two of the company's subsidiaries pleaded guilty in May to several charges of market manipulation and bribery in multiple countries. A Glencore subsidiary pleaded guilty to 7 counts of bribery in connection with its oil operations in Cameroon, Congo, Equatorial Guinea, Ivory Coast, Nigeria, and South Sudan. 1 month later, more than $1.5 billion in penalties have been imposed on Glencore by the US, the United Kingdom, and Brazil, and more could follow after Swiss and Dutch investigations are completed. But the repercussions shouldn't be limited to fines. No company has ever pleaded guilty to this much corruption. We find it extremely troubling that the executives who approved and benefited from the corruption have, as of yet, gone unscathed. Glencore's leaders, according to the African Energy Chamber, must be held accountable for their actions. Anything less sends the message that bribery is an unavoidable evil in places like Africa. This is not correct. Now is the time to make that fact abundantly clear to corporate leaders doing business in the region. It's worth mentioning that Glencore's actions were not a one-time incident. For more than a decade, Glencore International AG and its subsidiaries bribed officials in 7 countries. Corruption was, indeed, deeply embedded in the company culture. Bribery was simply one of the company's operating costs. It's also upsetting to see Glencore act in African countries. For example, when Glencore wanted to buy oil cargoes from Nigeria in 2015, it submitted $50,000 per cargo as advance payment. Glencore made $124 million in illegal profits as a result. The consequences for Nigeria's government, businesses, and communities include missed opportunities to form fruitful partnerships with companies interested in creating jobs. Supporting local businesses, sharing knowledge, and fostering economic growth. Glencore also avoided consequences for unethical business practices in Africa. In one case, after being sued for breach of contract and fined $16 million in damages in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Glencore paid the judge $500,000 and the lawsuit disappeared. Glencore has admitted to paying bribes totaling $27.5 million in the Democratic Republic of the Congo alone. The obvious double standards we've seen in the Glencore scandal have added insult to injury. Consider international oil companies' Know Your Client, KYC, and due diligence policies for doing business in Africa. Local company representatives who dare to bribe or tip a police officer who harasses them on the streets are told by international oil companies that they do not pass due diligence. They will never be hired to provide goods or services. The problem comes when those standards are not applied evenly, at the same time that African companies are being scrutinized for any sign of corruption. Glencore continues to do business with oil, gas, and mining companies that claim to be champions of transparency. Banks are still working with Glencore. Aside from some negative attention and financial consequences, Glencore appears to be avoiding serious consequences for its actions. Mr. Ayuk, executive chairman of the African Energy Chamber, called on the Oslo-based Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, EITI, to revoke Glencore's membership, noting that the company's involvement with EITI began while Glencore was engaging in the exact type of behavior that the initiative seeks to eliminate. That hasn't happened. The EITI expressed concern about Glencore's behavior in a statement issued by its board chair Helen Clark, but nothing has come of it. Their silence is a betrayal of the very principles they hold dear. Consider the penalties levied against Glencore. They're significant, but given Glencore's size and resources, it's difficult to see them having much of an impact. Glencore, on the other hand, appears to be doing well. Proactive Investors Limited, based in the United Kingdom, stated in a recent article that Glencore shares have increased in value by more than 50% in the last year. One reason why is that all the environmental, social and corporate governance bluster about ending coal use is now being thrown out of the window by one European country after another, and Glencore produces a lot of coal, and that's only part of the picture for Glencore. As Christopher Hellman wrote for Forbes, Glencore is in the enviable position of being among the world's biggest energy traders at a time of surging prices and shortages, as well as one of the biggest miners of metals like copper, aluminum and cobalt, all vital in making batteries for electric vehicles and other alternative energy sources. Which means, while billions of dollars of fines may sting a bit, Glencore isn't likely to feel it in the long term. Glencore's African victims aren't quite so bulletproof, but we have yet to hear talk about compensating them for the corruption and injustices that have taken place in their countries. Africans, both then and now, require good governance to meet their needs, grow the economy, alleviate energy poverty, create job and business opportunities, and promote stability. Bribery undercuts everything. Currently, African oil and gas producing countries are fighting to maintain their energy industries, which are capable of supporting the aforementioned goals, in the face of enormous pressure from environmentalists and Western countries who want to see our continent make an immediate transition to green energy. Yes, Europe has eased up a little as it looks to Africa to help it reduce its reliance on Russian oil, but this will not last forever. Glencore's corrupt acts and manipulation have robbed African countries of some of the precious time they need to fully capitalize on their oil and gas resources. Corruption deprives people of their right to justice. It entrenches communities in poverty rather than empowering people to improve their lives. It contributes to discontent, distrust in government leaders, instability, and even violence. Yes, Glencore's every corrupt act involved a third party, and outreached had to accept their bribes. However, the company's all-in embrace of bribery, as well as the grotesquely large payments it made, only aided corruption spread in Africa. Again, Glencore's corruption is about more than just a company, it all comes down to who is in charge. So, yes, investigating Glencore was the correct decision. Financial penalties were appropriate. However, these measures are insufficient. Glencore should face the same penalties as African companies for blatant, ongoing corruption. It should not be conducting business as usual. Neither should the executives behind Glencore's actions.